on Aboriginal land. This is the land of the Turrbal people, and directly across the river is the land of the Jagera people. And I'd like to acknowledge Aboriginal elders past, present and emerging, especially the women elders from the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community. And as always, I also want to acknowledge the sterling efforts of the women's resistance. Over many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, we've always resisted male supremacy, and we will never stop. I really want to welcome every one of you. You are among the very few people prepared to stand up at this time for women's and girls', especially lesbian, sex-based rights and safeguards for children. I know people, we all know people who agree with our stand and admire it, but are too afraid to join us. Some have legitimate fears for the loss of jobs, and I understand that completely. Others fear being rejected by family and friends, and I'm sure every one of you, like me, has been rejected by friends, sometimes friends of 30 and 40 years standing. Others say it's just too hard. It is hard. It's hard for us too, and still we come. Others don't want to be involved in something that's uncool, unfashionable, something for which they will receive abuse from liberal left colleagues, as we've all received abuse. I've never been called fat, ugly and old as often as in the last few years, as if those three things mean I'm not entitled to political activism. We're the height of political unfashionability to oppose the dominant orthodoxy promoted by the Queensland State Government, the big corporations and sundry woman haters. So welcome and well done for being here. Who could have known when we settled on today for our second rally against the Queensland Government's intention to pass self-sex ID this year, that we would also have an occasion to celebrate? Because it's less than a week since FINA decided that men are no longer eligible to compete at an elite level against women, regardless of the men's identity, and unless they'd transitioned by 12 years of age. FIFA has followed, and it seems a number of other peak sporting organisations are about to review their policies. Cycling so far has dug in against women. The pressure is on all the other codes to play fair. We have so very many setbacks in this struggle, and the FINA decision is a huge win. Yay! Woo! I don't have any champagne right now, but the venue that I've booked for lunch after our march is licensed. So if you'd like to come to lunch, let me know. People I know from the Liberal left and the Labor Party and the Greens have told me, many, it really doesn't matter if sex self-ID goes through because it doesn't affect many people. How wrong they are. It affects every woman, every girl, every lesbian, every child, every gay man. And it affects the most vulnerable people first. People from the Liberal left are mostly privileged. And for them, the suffering of women in prison who will have no say when men claiming a trans identity and often convicted of sexual assault crimes request to be housed in the women's estate. It's of little consequence. And I know a number of you, or probably a number of you, were recently on Drew Hutton's Facebook page. And when some of us made the point about women in prison And I quoted the Californian situation where hundreds of men who've declared a trans identity to get housed into the women's prisons, and there have been rapes. Who would have thought? But when we pointed these things out to the people on the Drew Hutton public page, people were just so uncaring. It's as if women just don't count. For feminists, however, the further suffering of women in prison who are likely to come from already marginalised backgrounds, and let's not forget that the women who are overrepresented in prison are women who come from backgrounds of abuse and violence. They come from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander backgrounds, overrepresented. They come from poverty. These are the people who will be hurt first when the prison's policy changes. We'll fight for their safety, their dignity, their basic human rights, and we won't stop. This is our second rally, and we will continue to meet, to speak with each other, to take a public presence. And hopefully the women in the other states will follow. Now, I hope people who've wanted to buy merch have already bought it, because we'll be packing up quickly, and once the speakers have had their say, we will, following Christine, who is about to raise her hand. Christine is leading our march. It's a footpath march. We'll go left into George, right into Adelaide. We will stop for 5 minutes at King George Square, and then we'll continue down and go right into Edward, right into Elizabeth, and back here. Now, the other side is actually having a rally this afternoon in King George Square. So it is important that we have our march on time and we get past King George Square without any trouble. If we're abused, can I just ask for us to not respond? And I know that's hard. I sometimes say to people, do as I say, not as I do, because I have been the one who has sometimes sworn at them. But let's try to not abuse back. If they do, and there's probably little chance of this, the police are here, but if there is any physical threat, then the chant that the UK women and the US women of let her speak is a good one. And if we're not speaking at that time, leave us alone is another good one. And we'll just continue on our way. So our speakers will speak fairly briefly. The last thing I wanted to say is that the Queensland government actually refused to recognise women as a stakeholder group in this matter of self-ID. I first wrote to the Attorney General and Minister for Women, Shannon Fentiman, in June of last year. So it's 12 months since I wrote, explaining why we are a stakeholder group, we have the most to lose, and asking to be involved in the consultations. Our meeting was refused, and other women have since been refused the opportunity. 2 months later, in August of last year, I wrote to the Premier, Anastasia Palaszczuk. She also, or her office also wrote back and said that we aren't a stakeholder group and we would not be able to have a meeting. So they can keep us out of their boardrooms and their meeting rooms, but they can't keep us off the streets, and we'll be back again. Woo! Sue.